On a muggy morning inland, a trained dog begins to act strangely, as if sensing something invisible. Meanwhile, an innocent child is caught in a burning trap left by urban neglect. The heat, smoke, and indifference create a suffocating scenario where every second matters. But when everything seemed to be ignored, an unwavering instinct races against time to prevent a tragedy. If this story interested you, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and give it a like. Tell us what city you are watching us from. We continue. Corbin Springs would wake to the weight of the heat sticking to the walls even before the sun had settled in the sky. It was an ordinary Thursday, the kind that feels eternal before it even begins. At the Central Market, vendors hurriedly set up their stalls, arranging fruits, vegetables, and trinkets while bargaining in loud voices. The city buses passed at uneven intervals, packed with people already tired before the day had started. Children walked to school with disproportionate backpacks, dragging their feet on the hot asphalt. In the Rosewood Heights neighborhood, on an unevenly paved street where the houses were crammed together, a rusty iron gate opened slowly. Walter Andrews pushed the gate with a body still heavy with sleep. He was 43, but he carried a fatigue that seemed to belong to someone much older. His hair was starting to gray at his temples, and the wrinkles around his eyes didn't come from smiling. They were the marks of someone who had lived too much in too little time. Walter was known in the neighborhood as the quiet man, not because he was unfriendly, but because he simply didn't talk much. He greeted neighbors with a nod, bought bread at the corner bakery without making more than necessary conversation, and spent his days inside his house with the windows closed. Some said he was rude, others said he was just sad. The truth was that Walter carried something that couldn't be put into words. He had been a police officer for nearly 20 years. He joined young, full of ideals and a desire to make a difference. He believed he could change the world with a badge and a sense of justice inherited from his father. But life on the force showed him that the world didn't change with goodwill. He saw things he shouldn't have seen. He took part in operations that made him question everything he believed in. And on one specific day, 5 years ago, something inside him broke. It was during a call in a low-income community on the outskirts of Austin. An operation that should have been simple, routine, but ended in a shootout that left invisible scars. Walter came out physically unscathed, but something inside him had shattered. He had panic attacks for months. He couldn't sleep. The sound of fireworks made him tremble. He was put on leave for psychological disability, but the official report called it partial disability. It was a polite way of saying he was no longer fit for service. Since then, Walter had lived on a small pension and odd jobs. He fixed things, painted walls, did small repairs for neighbors who took pity on him. It wasn't much, but it paid the bills. He lived alone in the house he had inherited from his mother, peeling walls, old furniture, few things that truly mattered. Except for one. Except for Zulu. Zulu was lying on the porch when Walter opened the gate. The dog lifted his head slowly, watching his owner with that fixed gaze that seemed to see right through people. He was a Belgian Malinois, a breed known for its sharp intelligence and protective instinct. Zulu had a dark coat, ever-alert ears, and defined muscles that betrayed his years of training. He had been a K-9 officer, trained for search, rescue, and patrol. When Walter retired, he asked to adopt Zulu. The dog was already too old for active duty, and no one else wanted him. It was a kind of mutual rescue. Walter saved Zulu from being discarded, and Zulu, without knowing it, saved Walter from sinking completely into loneliness. That morning, however, Zulu was different. It wasn't his usual calm demeanor. He was pacing the porch with short, restless steps. He would stop, look toward the street, then start pacing again. His ears twitched, picking up sounds Walter couldn't perceive. The man watched the dog for a few seconds as he filled an old plastic bowl with water. "What is it, Zulu? The heat getting to you?" The dog didn't respond. He just kept walking back and forth, growing more and more agitated. Walter found it strange but decided to ignore it. He went into the cramped kitchen, lit the stove, and started making coffee. The house smelled of must and dust. He wasn't one for cleaning much. He saw no point in tidying up a place where no one else ever came. As the water boiled, Walter looked out the kitchen window. From there he could see part of the street. A few children ran by, an old man swept the sidewalk, a woman hung laundry on a line. Normal life, nothing special. But Zulu remained restless. The dog started to bark. It wasn't the warning bark he gave when someone approached the gate. It was something different, more urgent, more desperate. Walter left his coffee cup on the sink and went back to the porch. Zulu was standing at the front of the gate, his body tense, his eyes fixed on a specific direction down the street. He barked intermittently, as if trying to communicate something that human words couldn't reach. "What the hell is wrong with you?" Zulu turned his head to Walter, and in that instant, the man saw something he knew well. It was the same look the dog had during rescue training, the look of one who has detected something wrong, of one who knows someone needs help. Walter felt a shiver run up his spine. It couldn't be. They were retired. There were no more missions, no more rescues. That was all in the past, but Zulu didn't care about the past. He scratched at the gate with his paws, trying to open it. He let out a low, deep howl, a sound that came from his gut. Walter hesitated. Part of him wanted to ignore it, to go back inside, drink his coffee, and get on with his day as usual. But there was another part, the one that still held remnants of the man he used to be, that knew Zulu had never been wrong before. All right. Walter took the keys from his pocket and opened the gate. The moment the way was clear, Zulu shot off. Not like an uncontrolled animal, but with purpose. Every step was calculated, every movement had direction. The dog was running, but not running away. He was heading toward something. Walter felt his heart race. He quickly slipped on his sandals and went after the dog. "Zulu, get back here!" But the dog didn't come back. He crossed the street, dodged parked cars, and cut through the small square 2 blocks from the house. Walter ran after him, feeling the heat hit his face and the sweat start to pour. He wasn't in shape. The years spent cooped up at home had taken their toll. But something inside him, something he thought had died, was waking up. It was instinct, the reflex of someone who had spent years responding to emergencies. Zulu ran through the market without being distracted by the smells of food. He ignored the shouts of the vendors, the barking of other dogs, the deafening noise of the city waking up. He moved in a straight line as if guided by an invisible thread. Walter tried to keep up, but was losing ground. He could only see the dog's dark silhouette disappearing between people and stalls. Where is he going? The question went unanswered. Walter kept running, now with heavy breath and a burning chest. He turned left onto a street he recognized. It was a road that had been recently paved by the city. He remembered because he had seen the trucks passing by days ago. He remembered the strong smell of tar, the noise of the machines. But he also remembered something else. He remembered that the work had been done in a hurry, without proper signage. The residents had complained. They said it was dangerous. But no one had listened. It was as he turned that corner that Walter stopped. The scene before him was surreal. In the middle of the street, in a dark pool of tar that had not yet completely dried, was a child, a little girl, no more than 7 years old, with her feet sunk up to her ankles in the black sticky mass. She was motionless, her arms raised in a gesture of despair, her face contorted in pain. Her legs were red, burned by the heat of the fresh asphalt. Next to her, Zulu stood, growling low at the cars that passed without stopping. Some drivers honked irritably, others swerved and drove on. No one stopped, no one helped. Walter was paralyzed for a second. He couldn't process what he was seeing. How was it possible that no one had stopped? How was it possible that a child was there, clearly in danger, and people just drove right by? He looked around. Some windows were open. People were watching from a distance, but no one came down. No one moved. It was as if everyone had decided this wasn't their problem. The girl lifted her face. Her eyes met Walter's. They were eyes full of pain, fear, and incomprehension. She didn't understand why she was stuck. She didn't understand why it hurt so much. She didn't understand why no one was coming. And in that look, Walter saw something that cut him in two. He saw helplessness. He saw loneliness. He saw the reflection of everything he himself felt every day. Something inside him ruptured. Walter ran. He didn't think. He didn't hesitate. He ran toward the girl, feeling the heat of the asphalt rise through the soles of his sandals. When he got close, he realized the gravity of the situation. The girl was truly trapped. The tar had stuck to the thin skin of her ankles and feet. Every attempt to move only made her sink deeper. The mass was hot, almost boiling. The smell was nauseating, a mixture of burnt rubber, chemicals, and desperation. "It's okay. Stay calm. I'm going to get you out of there." The girl looked at him without saying anything. Tears streamed down her soot-stained face. Walter knelt beside her, trying to assess the best course of action. He couldn't just pull her out forcefully. It would tear her skin off. He needed to soften the tar first. But with what? He looked around desperately. He saw a drink stand on the corner. He ran over. "Give me a bottle of water, quick." The vendor, a middle-aged man, looked confused. "What's going on?" "There's a kid stuck in the asphalt. I need water now." The man didn't argue. He grabbed a large bottle and handed it. "Over." Walter ran back. He poured the water over the girl's feet. The liquid evaporated almost instantly. It didn't work. The heat was too intense. He needed something else. Oil. He remembered his old training. Oil dissolves tar. He looked around again and saw a woman frying pastries at a nearby stall. "Let me borrow some oil. It's an emergency." The woman hesitated, but something in Walter's voice made her obey. She grabbed an old bottle of cooking oil and handed it over. Walter returned, knelt again, and began to pour the oil over the girl's legs. He grabbed an old rag he found on the ground and began to rub gently, trying to soften the mass. The tar began to give way, slowly, very slowly. Zulu never left their side. The dog kept growling at the cars, as if trying to protect the scene. A few people started to gather. A woman was shouting for help. A man was filming with his phone. Another tried to intervene but slipped on the wet asphalt. Chaos grew around them, but Walter no longer heard anything. He only saw the girl. He only felt the desperate urgency to get her out of there. "What's your name?" The girl took a moment to answer. Her voice came out weak, almost a whisper. "Olivia." "Olivia. That's a pretty name. I'm Walter. I'm going to get you out, okay? But you need to stay very still." She nodded. Walter continued to work, pouring more oil, rubbing with the rag, pulling gently. The girl's skin was burned. Blisters were beginning to form. He knew that every second there increased the risk of permanent damage, but he couldn't rush it. He had to do it right. Suddenly a woman's voice cut through the air. "Olivia! Oh my God, Olivia!" Walter looked up and saw a woman running toward them. She was young, maybe in her 30s, with her hair tied in a messy ponytail and her eyes wide with panic. She was followed by an older woman, probably the girl's grandmother. The woman tried to get closer, but Walter held up a hand. "Don't come any closer, you'll slip." "My daughter. What happened to my daughter?" "She stepped in the fresh asphalt. I'm getting her out, but you need to stay calm." The woman brought her hands to her face, trembling. The older woman held her by the shoulders, trying to calm her. Walter went back to work. He managed to free one foot, then the other. When he finally freed Olivia, he lifted her into his arms carefully, as if carrying something extremely fragile. The girl weighed almost nothing. Her body was limp, exhausted. He carried her to the sidewalk and laid her down in the shade. Olivia's mother ran to them and knelt beside her daughter. She was crying uncontrollably, holding the girl's small hand. The grandmother also approached, making nervous signs of the cross over her granddaughter. In the distance, finally, the sound of sirens began to approach. The ambulance was coming, but it felt like it had taken an eternity. Walter stepped back a few paces, his hands trembling. He looked at his own palms. They were red, stinging. The tar had stuck to him, too. He hadn't felt it at the time, but now the pain was starting to set in. Zulu came over and nudged his leg with his snout, as if checking if he was okay. Walter stroked the dog's head, feeling the soft fur under his fingers. "Good boy. You knew, didn't you? You always know." The ambulance arrived. Paramedics got out quickly, carrying equipment. They attended to Olivia with professional efficiency, placing cool compresses on the burns, checking her vital signs, preparing her for transport. The girl's mother wanted to get in the ambulance, but the paramedics asked her to follow in her own car and meet them at the hospital. They needed space to work. Before they took Olivia away, the woman turned to Walter. Her eyes were red, swollen from crying. She opened her mouth to say something, but the words wouldn't come. She just placed a hand on his shoulder, squeezed gently, and nodded. It was a silent thank you, an acknowledgement that he had saved the most precious thing she had. Walter said nothing. He just watched the ambulance leave, its sirens cutting through the hot morning air. Gradually, the crowd began to disperse. People went back to their lives. The pastry vendor resumed frying. The drink vendor put away his bottles. The street returned to normal, as if nothing had happened. But for Walter, nothing would ever be normal again. He walked home slowly, Zulu at his side. His hands still stung, his body was tired, but there was something different, something he hadn't felt in a long time. It wasn't happiness, it wasn't pride, it was just a feeling that maybe, just maybe, there was still some purpose, some reason to keep going. When he got home, he washed his hands with cold water, applied ointment to the minor burns, and sat on the porch. Zulu lay down beside him, his breathing returning to normal. Walter sat there for a long time, looking out at the empty street, trying to process what had happened. That morning he had woken up as usual, expecting only to survive another day. But the day had other plans. The day had forced him to remember who he was, or who he had been. The afternoon fell slowly over Corbin Springs. The heat remained intense, the sky a cloudless blue. In the house next door, a neighbor watered her plants. On the street, children were returning from school. Life went on, indifferent to the small dramas that played out in the shadows. But for Walter, something had changed. Something small, almost imperceptible, but real. He had moved. He had acted. He had, for the first time in years, made a difference, and Zulu, lying there beside him, with his eyes half closed and his breathing calm, seemed to know it. He seemed to understand that this day hadn't just been about rescuing a little girl. It had been about rescuing himself, about remembering that there were still reasons to get out of bed, that there were still reasons to go on, that life, however painful, still held moments when everything made sense, even if those moments were rare, even if they came with pain. Still, they were worth it. Night arrived slowly, bringing with it a timid relief from the heat. Walter went inside, prepared a simple meal, fed Zulu and went to bed early. But sleep didn't come easily. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw Olivia's face. He saw the frightened eyes, the burned legs, the expression of helplessness, and he also saw something else. He saw the girl's mother. Something about her was familiar, very familiar, but Walter couldn't place it. Maybe it was just exhaustion. Maybe his mind was playing tricks on him, or maybe it was something he wasn't yet ready to remember. He turned on his side in bed, listening to the distant sound of cars on the main avenue. Zulu was lying on the floor beside the bed, as always. The dog was his only constant companion, his only certainty in a world that no longer seemed to make sense. And that night, after everything that had happened, Walter felt a silent gratitude for having him, for having someone who, even without words, understood, someone who, despite being an animal, showed more humanity than many humans he had known. Finally, sleep came, heavy, laden with confused images. He dreamed of uniforms, of dark streets, of distant sirens. He dreamed of the past he tried to forget, but he also dreamed of something new. He dreamed of a girl with frightened eyes being carried away from danger. And in that dream, for the first time in a long time, he didn't feel useless. He didn't feel discarded. He felt that there was still, somewhere hidden inside him, a piece of the man he once was. And maybe, just maybe, that piece could be rebuilt. One day at a time, one choice at a time, one rescue at a time. The city slept, indifferent to its dramas. But inside that small house in the Rosewood Heights neighborhood, something had awakened, something that had lain dormant for years. And this awakening, however painful, brought with it a silent promise. The promise that it wasn't too late, that there was still time to fix what was broken, that life, despite everything, still held possibilities. Corbin Springs Regional Hospital was crowded as always, narrow hallways, the smell of disinfectant mixed with anxiety, people waiting on hard plastic chairs. Walter didn't want to be there. He didn't like hospitals. They brought back bad memories, but he couldn't stay home. Since waking up that morning, he had thought only of Olivia, how she was doing. If the burns were serious, if there would be lasting damage, he needed to know. And as much as he tried to convince himself it was just ordinary concern, he knew there was something more, something he couldn't name. He went to the reception desk without really knowing what to ask. How would he explain his presence? He wasn't family, he wasn't an acquaintance. He was just the man who had pulled the girl from the asphalt. But would that be enough to get information? He decided to try anyway. He approached the counter where a young woman in a white coat was typing something on a computer without looking up. "Excuse me, I wanted to ask about a girl who was admitted yesterday. Olivia. She had burns from hot tar." The woman finally looked up. She had the tired expression of someone who works too much and sleeps too little. "Are you family?" "No, I helped with the rescue. I just wanted to know if she's okay." "Sorry, but I can't give out information to non-family members. It's hospital policy." Walter was about to insist, but a voice interrupted him. "Walter!" He turned, and then the world stopped. There, a few feet away, was the woman from yesterday, Olivia's mother. But now, seeing her up close in better light and without the desperation of the moment, Walter recognized her. Completely. The face, the eyes, the way she tilted her head when she spoke. Everything. It was Rosemary. Rosemary Smith. The girl he had loved 15 years ago. The girl with whom he had planned a life that never happened. Rosemary? The two of them stood there, looking at each other. The hallway continued to bustle around them, but they seemed to be alone in a bubble of silence. She took a step forward, hesitant, as if unsure he was real. Her eyes were the same. Brown, expressive, full of stories he knew and others he didn't. Her face was more mature. A few expression lines marked her forehead and the corners of her eyes. But it was her, without a doubt. "I didn't believe it when they told me your name. I thought it was a coincidence. But it's you. It's really you." Walter didn't know what to say. He felt his throat tighten. So many years, so long without any news, so much silence between them. And now here, in a hospital corridor, fate had brought them face to face again. He tried to say something, but the words wouldn't come. Rosemary sensed his discomfort and forced a shaky smile. "You saved my daughter. I didn't even get to thank you properly yesterday. I was so frantic, I just wanted to say that I'm so grateful. Truly." "How is she?" Rosemary took a deep breath before answering. "Stable. The burns are 2nd degree, but the doctors said she'll make a full recovery. She'll need daily dressing changes and physical therapy later, but nothing irreversible, thanks to you, if it weren't. For you, I don't know what would have happened." She paused, biting her lower lip like she used to when she was nervous. Walter remembered that gesture. He remembered a lot of things he thought he had forgotten. "Do you want to see her? She was asking about you this morning." Walter hesitated. Part of him wanted to leave immediately. Go back home. Back to the safe isolation where things couldn't touch him. But another part, the same one that had made him run after Zulu the day before, pushed him forward. He nodded. "If it's no bother." "It's no bother, come on." Rosemary led him through the corridors to the pediatric ward on the 2nd floor. It was a small room with 4 beds. Olivia was in the bed near the window. Her legs were bandaged, her face still pale, but her eyes lit up when she saw Walter enter. Beside the bed, sitting in an uncomfortable chair, was the older woman he had seen the day before. Olivia's grandmother. She stood up as they entered, studying Walter with attentive eyes. "Mom, this is Walter, the man who saved Olivia." The older woman nodded slowly. There was something in her gaze that Walter couldn't decipher. It wasn't gratitude, it wasn't hostility. It was something close to recognition, as if she also knew him from somewhere. But Walter was sure he had never seen her before. "Marilyn, I'm Rosemary's mother and Olivia's grandmother. Thank you so much for what you did." Her voice was firm but carried a certain weight. Walter just nodded and approached the bed. Olivia gave a faint smile. "Hi, mister. Did you bring the dog?" Walter let out a smile, the first genuine one in a long time. I couldn't bring him. Hospitals don't allow dogs. But Zulu sends his regards. He's handsome. I liked him. He liked you too. In fact, he's the one who found you. I just followed him. Olivia seemed to ponder this for a moment, processing the information with the seriousness of someone who understands something important has happened. So he saved me too. Yes, he saved you. And he's very good at it. The girl smiled again and closed her eyes. Tired. Rosemary gestured for Walter to follow her into the hallway. Marilyn stayed in the room watching everything with that indecipherable expression. Outside, Rosemary leaned against the wall and took a deep breath. Sorry, she's still on medication. It makes her sleepy. No problem. I'm glad she's doing better. They stood in silence for a few seconds. Walter felt the weight of 15 years pressing on the space between them. There was so much to say, so much to ask, but where to begin? Rosemary was the one who broke the silence. Are you living here in Corbin Springs now? I am, in Rosewood Heights. I came back about 5 years ago. I've been here for 7 years. I live with my mom and Olivia. Walter noticed she didn't mention a husband. Didn't mention a partner, but he didn't ask either. It wasn't his business, not anymore. Are you still on the force? The question hit Walter like a punch. He took a moment to answer. No. I was placed on leave 5 years ago. Disability. Rosemary looked at him with surprise and something that seemed like concern. I'm sorry. I didn't know. It's fine. It was for the best. A lie. It wasn't fine. It had never been fine. But Walter wasn't going to dump his problems there. He wasn't going to turn this reunion into a therapy session. Rosemary seemed to understand. She had always been good at understanding what he didn't say. Look, I know it's been a long time, and I know things didn't end well between us, but I'd like to talk, really. Maybe grab a coffee sometime, just to catch up. Don't you think we deserve that? Walter hesitated. Every fiber of his being screamed to refuse, to keep his distance, to not open doors he had locked with so much effort. But at the same time, there was a part of him that longed for that conversation, that wanted to understand what had happened, why she had left, why she had never gotten in touch. These were questions he had carried for 15 years without answers. Okay, we can talk. Rosemary smiled, a relieved smile. How about tomorrow? There's a coffee shop near Victory Square. Do you know it? I know it. 3 o'clock then? 3 o'clock. Rosemary touched his arm lightly, a quick gesture, but one laden with meaning. Thank you, Walter, for everything. He just nodded and walked away. He needed to get out of there. He needed air. As he walked through the hospital corridors, he felt his heart pounding. It wasn't fear. It was something more complex. It was the feeling that his life, which had stood still for years, was about to move again, and he didn't know if he was ready for it. The next day, Walter woke up earlier than usual. He hadn't slept well. He had spent the night tossing and turning, thinking about the conversation he would have with Rosemary. He made coffee, fed Zulu, and tried to keep himself busy with small tasks. But the clock seemed to be moving slowly on purpose. At 2:30 he showered, put on a clean shirt, and left the house. Zulu followed him to the gate with questioning eyes. Stay here, boy. I'll be back soon. The dog sat but continued to watch until Walter disappeared around the corner. The coffee shop was in a renovated old building, with wooden tables and walls painted a light yellow. It had a cozy feel, different from the impersonal franchises that were spreading across the city. Walter arrived 5 minutes early. He sat at a table in the corner, away from the windows, and ordered a black coffee. His hands were trembling slightly. He hid them under the table. Rosemary arrived promptly at 3. She was wearing a light blue blouse and jeans. Her hair was down, falling over her shoulders. She saw Walter and waved, approaching with hesitant steps. She sat across from him and ordered a cappuccino from the passing waitress. Hi. Hi. They looked at each other for a few seconds. So much time, so much history. Rosemary was the one who started. I don't know where to begin. Neither do I. She laughed nervously, and fiddled with the napkin on the table, maybe at the beginning then, about what happened 15 years ago. Walter felt his chest tighten. This was the subject he avoided even in his own thoughts, but now it was here, exposed, inevitable. "Why did you leave, Rosemary?" She took a deep breath. Her eyes welled up, but she blinked back the tears. "I was pregnant." The world stopped again. Walter felt as if he had been struck by lightning. Pregnant. The word echoed in his mind, carrying enormous implications. "With Olivia?" "Yes, with Olivia. But you never told me. You just disappeared." Rosemary wiped away a tear that escaped. "I know, and I regret it every single day, but at the time I was scared. You had just joined the police force. You were focused on your career, and I was so young, I was 20, I didn't know what to do. My mother found out and was furious. She said I would ruin my life, that I would ruin yours. She convinced me to leave, to have the baby far away, to start over. And you went. I went. God, Walter, I went. And I regretted every second. But when I tried to come back, you had already moved. I looked for you but couldn't find you. And over time, I thought it was better to leave things as they were. You had your life, I had mine." Walter felt anger rising, but he also felt something else. Pain, sadness, the crushing sense of all that was lost, of all the years that would not return, of a daughter that might be his and he never knew. "Olivia, is she mine?" Rosemary hesitated, and in that hesitation, Walter saw the answer. "I'm not sure. When I found out I was pregnant, we were together, but right after, while I was still confused, I went out with someone else. It was brief, it was wrong, but it happened. When I found out I was pregnant, I didn't know whose it was, and I preferred not to know. I preferred to raise her alone and not involve anyone. So she could be mine, or she might not be." "Yes." Walter leaned back in his chair, processing it all. 15 years of his life had been based on a lie, an omission. He could have been a father. He could have had a family. It could have been different, or maybe not. Maybe it was just another illusion, another possibility that would never materialize. "Do you want to know now?" The question caught Walter off guard. "Know what?" "If you're her father. We can do a test, a paternity test, if you want." Walter didn't know how to respond. Part of him screamed yes, that he needed to know, that he had a right to know. But another part was afraid of the answer, afraid of finding out that yes, he was the father and having to deal with everything that meant. Or worse, afraid of finding out he wasn't and having to deal with the disappointment. "I need to think." Rosemary nodded. "Of course, I understand. It's a lot to take in at once." They fell silent again. Her coffee was getting cold in the cup. His was already finished. The coffee shop was full now, voices blending into a confused murmur. But they were isolated on their own island of silence and weight. "How are you, really?" Rosemary's question was simple but loaded. Walter thought about lying, about saying he was fine, that life was good. But looking at her, at the eyes he had once known so well, he couldn't. "Not very well. The truth is, I haven't been very well for years." "What happened? On the force?" Walter told her. For the first time in 5 years, he told someone. He told her about the operation that went wrong, about the shootout, about the people who were lost, about how he felt responsible, about the panic attacks, about the disability leave, about how he had spent the last 5 years just existing, not truly living. Rosemary listened to it all without interrupting, her eyes fixed on him, absorbing every word. When he finished, she reached her hand across the table and touched his. The gesture was gentle but full of compassion. "I'm so sorry. I had no idea you were going through that. No one knows. I don't talk about it. But you should. Keeping it all inside only makes it worse." Walter knew she was right, but knowing and doing were different things. He had spent his entire life being taught to be strong, not to show weakness, to bear it alone. Unlearning that was harder than it seemed. "Olivia asked about you again today. She wants to see Zulu." Walter almost smiled. He liked her too. He's been different since that day, more lively. Maybe you both needed it. A purpose. Maybe. Rosemary finished her coffee and checked her watch. I have to go. My mum is with Olivia at the hospital and she can't stay alone for too long. But can we talk again? Soon? We can. And about the test. Think about it. You don't have to decide now, but when you do, let me know. Walter agreed. They both stood up and left the coffee shop together. Outside, the sun was still strong, though it was past 4. Rosemary turned to him before she left. Walter, I know I messed everything up 15 years ago. I know there's no excuse for what I did, but I want you to know that I never forgot you, and that I'm grateful you showed up right when Olivia needed you. Fate works in mysterious ways, doesn't it? It does. She waved goodbye and walked down the sidewalk. Walter stood for a moment watching her leave. Then he turned and headed home. It was a long walk, but he needed the time to think, to process, to try to organize the chaos his mind had become. When he got home, Zulu greeted him enthusiastically. Walter sat on the porch and the dog lay down beside him, resting his head on his owner's legs. Walter sat there for hours, stroking Zulu's fur, staring into space, trying to find answers that didn't seem to exist. Night fell, and he finally went inside. He prepared a simple meal, ate without paying attention to what he was chewing, and went to bed early. But sleep wouldn't come. He stared at the ceiling, replaying the conversation with Rosemary. Pregnant. Olivia. Maybe his daughter. Maybe not. The uncertainty was almost worse than any truth, because the uncertainty kept him suspended between two worlds, between being a father and not being one, between having a family and being alone. He thought of Olivia, of her smile when she asked about Zulu, of her frightened eyes when she was stuck in the asphalt. He thought about how he had felt an immediate connection with her, as if some part of him recognized some part of her. Was it just empathy? Or was it something deeper, something biological, something that the blood recognized even without proof? He turned on his side and closed his eyes. He needed to sleep. He needed to rest. But his mind wouldn't shut off. It kept spinning, processing, questioning, and somewhere deep, very deep, a decision began to form, slowly, hesitantly, but real. He needed to know. He needed the truth, because as bad as the truth might be, it was better than living in uncertainty. It was better than spending the rest of his life wondering what might have been. The next morning, Walter woke up with his decision made. He picked up his phone, found the number Rosemary had given him the day before, and sent a simple message. I want to do the test. When can we? Rosemary's reply came minutes later. I can schedule it for tomorrow. There's a clinic on Florian Avenue that does the test. I'll send you the address. Walter read and reread the message several times. It was real. It was actually happening. In less than a week he would know if he was a father, if he had a 7-year-old daughter who had grown up without him. Anxiety tightened its grip on his chest. He got out of bed, went to the kitchen, and drank water straight from the tap. He needed to calm down. He needed to think clearly, but clarity seemed a distant prospect. Zulu appeared in the kitchen, watching his owner attentively. The dog always knew when something was wrong. He had a keen instinct for detecting emotional shifts. Walter bent down and scratched behind his ears. It's going to be okay, boy. It has to be. The next day, Walter woke up with a knot in his stomach. He couldn't eat breakfast. He just showered, got dressed, and left the house half an hour early. The clinic was in a busy commercial area. A new building, glass facade, a spacious reception with comfortable sofas. It was all very different from what he expected. He had imagined something more clinical, colder, but this looked more like a modern office than a medical clinic. Rosemary was already there when he arrived, sitting on one of the sofas, fiddling with her phone with a tense expression. She stood up when she saw him. Hi, I got here early. I was too anxious to stay at home. Me too. They went to the reception desk, where a friendly young woman assisted them. She explained the procedure. It was simple. A buccal swab collection, painless, quick. The results would be ready in Situnaiba 5 business days. 5 days that felt like an eternity. Walter was called first. He went into a small room where a lab technician took the sample. She rubbed a large cotton swab on the inside of his cheek, then placed it in a sterile tube. Done. That was it. A few seconds that would determine the rest of his life. When he came out, Rosemary went in with Olivia. The girl was in a temporary wheelchair because of her burns. The bandages still covered a good part of her legs, but she seemed more cheerful than the last time. Walter had seen her. Her eyes shone with curiosity when she recognized him. "Hi, mister." "Hi, Olivia. How are you?" "Better. The doctor said I'll be able to walk again soon, but for now it's just the chair." "Did you bring Zulu today?" "I didn't, but I promise you'll get to meet him properly soon." The girl smiled and went into the room with her mother. Walter waited in the hallway, his hands sweating, his heart racing. When they were done, the three of them left the clinic together. Outside, the heat was suffocating. Rosemary carefully pushed Olivia's wheelchair, dodging hurried pedestrians. "Want to have lunch with us? There's a restaurant on the corner. Nothing fancy, but the food is good." Walter hesitated for only a second before accepting. They went to a simple, self-service restaurant with ceiling fans and Formica tables. They got their food and sat in a quieter corner. Olivia ate with gusto, telling stories about the hospital, about the other patients, about a very nice nurse who let her draw during her dressing changes. Walter listened, but his mind was elsewhere. It was on the test results. It was imagining what he would do if it was positive, and what he would do if it was negative. Rosemary seemed to notice his tension. "Are you okay?" "I am. Just thinking." "I know. I can't stop thinking either." Olivia, oblivious to the adults' conversation, continued talking about the hospital until she finished her food. Then she asked to go to the restroom. Rosemary helped her get there, leaving Walter alone at the table for a few minutes. He took the opportunity to watch the restaurant's activity. Families having lunch, workers on their lunch break, couples talking. Normal life. Simple. Something he had never really had. And maybe never would. When Rosemary and Olivia returned, the girl asked if they could go to the park before going home. She wanted to see the birds. Rosemary looked at Walter as if seeking silent approval. He agreed. They went to Victory Square, a wooded space in the city centre. There were a few benches in the shade, a small old-fashioned bandstand, and several pigeons that came to eat crumbs people threw. Olivia loved it. She asked to get out of the chair and sit on a bench. Her legs still hurt, but she insisted. Rosemary helped her carefully. Walter sat beside them, watching the girl throw bits of bread to the pigeons. There was something comforting in that scene, something that made him feel part of something bigger, something he hadn't felt in years. It was a strange but good feeling, as if a hole he didn't even know existed was beginning to close. "Mummy said you used to be a policeman." Olivia's voice pulled him from his thoughts. "I was." "And you caught bad guys?" "Sometimes." "And you used a gun?" "I did." It must be cool to be a policeman. Walter thought before answering. Sometimes it's cool. But other times it's hard. You see a lot of bad things, a lot of people suffering. But you help people, right? Like you helped me. "Yes, I try to help." "Then it's a good job." The simplicity of a child's logic made him smile. Olivia was right in essence. It was a good job, or it was supposed to be. But somewhere along the way, Walter had lost the ability to see it that way. He had gotten lost between the bureaucracy, the corruption, the violence, and the disillusionment. But maybe, just maybe, there was still time to regain that perspective, to believe again that he could make a difference. They stayed in the park for almost an hour. They talked about simple things, about the school Olivia attended, about her friends, about the cartoon she loved, about Zulu and how smart he was. It was a light conversation, without weight, without demands, and Walter realized that was exactly what he needed. Lightness, simplicity, uncomplicated human connection. When the sun began to set, Rosemary said they had to go. Olivia had a physical therapy appointment that afternoon. Walter offered to help carry the wheelchair to the car. When they reached the parking lot, a male voice interrupted them. "Rosemary?" The three of them turned. A man was approaching. He was tall, strong, with a well-groomed beard and expensive clothes. He had an expression that mixed surprise with something close to restrained anger. Walter immediately noticed the tension in Rosemary's body. "Claudio, what are you doing here?" "I came by to see Olivia. I heard about the accident. Your mother called me." The man looked at Olivia with genuine concern, but then his gaze shifted to Walter. It was an appraising, suspicious look. "Who are you?" "Walter. A friend." "A friend?" The word came out laden with doubt. Claudio looked at Rosemary, waiting for an explanation. She took a deep breath before speaking. "Claudio, this is Walter. He was the one who saved Olivia when she got stuck in the asphalt." Claudio's expression changed minimally. There was acknowledgement there, but also something more, something Walter recognized as territoriality. "I see. Thanks for your help." But the tone wasn't one of gratitude. It was one of protocol. Walter just nodded. Claudio approached Olivia and crouched down to her level. "How are you, Princess?" "Better. It doesn't hurt as much anymore." "Good. You gave me quite a scare." After a few minutes of forced conversation, Claudio stepped away. But first he pulled Rosemary aside. Walter stayed with Olivia, pretending not to pay attention to their conversation. But it was impossible not to hear snippets. "Who is he really, Rosemary?" "I already told you, a friend." "A friend? You disappear for years, come back to Corbin Springs, and suddenly show up with a friend who saves our daughter. Don't treat me like an idiot." "Our daughter?" "Yes, ours. Or have you forgotten?" Rosemary didn't answer. She just walked away and returned to Walter and Olivia. Her face was flushed, her eyes shining with contained anger. Claudio said goodbye to the girl and left without a backward glance. When he was out of sight, Rosemary let out the breath she had been holding. "Sorry about that." "You don't have to be sorry." It's complicated." "Is he Olivia's father?" Rosemary hesitated before answering. "He thinks he is, and I let him believe that for a long time. But the truth is, I never knew for sure. He and you were in my life around the same time. Except with him, I tried to start over after you were gone, but it didn't work out. We separated when Olivia was 3. So he doesn't know about the test?" "No. And I'm not going to tell him until I'm sure." Walter understood. It was complicated, very complicated, and it would get even more complicated depending on the result. If Walter was the father, Claudio would lose the daughter he had raised as his own for 4 years. If Claudio was the father, Walter would lose the chance at a family he had just found. There was no good scenario, no guaranteed happy ending. There was only the truth. And the truth sometimes was the cruelest thing there was. They took Olivia to physical therapy, and then Rosemary offered Walter a ride. He accepted. During the drive, they were silent. Olivia slept in the back seat, tired from the day. When they arrived at Walter's house, Rosemary turned off the engine but didn't say anything right away. She stared ahead, her hands still on the steering wheel. "I'm scared of the result." Her voice was low, almost a whisper. "Me too. Whatever it is, I want you to know that I'm grateful for everything. For saving her. For being here now, for agreeing to do the test. I know it's not easy. None of this is easy. I know. But it's necessary. It is." Walter opened the car door, but before getting out, he turned to her. "Rosemary, regardless of the result, I want to be a part of Olivia's life. If you'll let me. Even if I'm not the biological father. I like her, and I think she likes me. And Zulu." Rosemary smiled through teary eyes. "I would love that." He got out of the car and waved. He stood on the sidewalk until the car disappeared around the corner. Then he went inside, where Zulu was waiting anxiously. The dog jumped on him, excited, as if he had been alone for days instead of hours. Walter bent down and hugged the animal, feeling the soft fur against his face. "We're getting into trouble, boy. Big trouble." But even as he said it, Walter knew he didn't regret it. For the first time in years, he felt like he was truly living, that he was feeling real things, that he cared about something beyond his own pain, and that, as scary as it was also liberating. The following days were torture, Walter couldn't do anything right. He tried to keep busy, but his mind always went back to the test, to the result, to what would come next. Rosemary sent daily messages. She asked how he was. She told him about Olivia's recovery. She said the girl asked about him and Zulu, and Walter replied, keeping the conversation light, avoiding the invisible elephant in the room. On the fourth day of waiting, Rosemary asked if he wanted to have dinner at her house. Marilyn, her mother, had insisted. She wanted to get to Bay, know him better, to thank him personally. Walter hesitated but ended up accepting. Maybe it would be good. Maybe it would help pass the time. He arrived at the agreed time, bringing a simple cake he had bought at the bakery. The house was small but cozy, walls painted in light colors, old but well-kept furniture, family photos scattered on the shelves. Olivia was in the living room, sitting on the sofa with her legs stretched out. When she saw Walter, her face lit up. "You came." "I did. And next time I'm bringing Zulu." "Really? Really?" Marilyn appeared from the kitchen, wiping her hands on a dish towel. She looked at Walter with that same expression he couldn't decipher. There was something there, something she knew but wasn't saying. "Walter, welcome. Dinner's almost ready." "Thanks for having me." "It's the least we could do. You saved my granddaughter." The dinner was surprisingly pleasant. They talked about various things. Marilyn told old stories of Corbin Springs, from when the city was smaller and everyone knew each other. Olivia talked about school, about her friends, about how she wanted to go back to class soon. Rosemary participated in the conversation, but Walter noticed she was tense. She checked her phone frequently, as if expecting an important call. After dinner, while Rosemary was putting Olivia to bed, Marilyn invited Walter to sit on the porch. She brought 2 coffees and settled into an old rocking chair. Walter sat in the other chair, waiting. He knew this conversation had a purpose. "You like my daughter?" It wasn't a question, it was a statement. Walter saw no point in denying it. "I did. I do. I always have." "And she likes you. She never forgot you, you know. Even after all these years, even after Claudio, she always talked about you, the man she let get away. I didn't know she was pregnant. I know, it was my fault. I made her leave. I convinced her it was for the best, and I regret it every day, because I saw my daughter unhappy for years. I saw her trying to build something with Claudio that was never real. I saw her raising a girl alone, pretending everything was fine, but it never was. And now you're back, and things are changing, and I don't know if that's good or bad." "Why are you telling me this?" Marilyn took a sip of her coffee before answering. "Because tomorrow you're going to get the test results, and whatever they are, it's going to change everything. And I need to know that you're prepared for that you won't give up, that you won't disappear again. Because if you're going to hurt my daughter and my granddaughter again, you'd better leave now." Walter held her gaze. There was strength in those eyes. There was fierce maternal protection. And there was also a silent plea. "I'm not going to disappear, I promise." Marilyn nodded, seeming satisfied with his answer. They sat in silence for a few minutes, just listening to the sounds of the night. Crickets, cars passing in the distance, a television on in the neighboring house. The next morning, Walter woke up to a message from Rosemary. "The results are in. We can pick them up at the clinic from 10 a.m. Walter looked at the clock. It was 7:15, nearly 3 hours to go. How was he going to survive 3 hours? He got up, showered, had coffee, tried to watch television, but nothing worked. Time dragged on as if stuck in molasses. At 9:30, he couldn't take it anymore. He left the house and walked to the clinic. He arrived almost half an hour early. Rosemary was already there, sitting on the same sofa as last time. When she saw him, she stood up. Her eyes were red. She had been crying. "Are you okay?" "I don't know. I don't think so. I'm afraid to open the envelope." "Then let's open it together." They went to the reception desk, where the same friendly young woman from before handed them a sealed envelope. Rosemary held it with trembling hands. Walter placed his hand over hers. "Breathe." She took a deep breath. She opened the envelope slowly. She took out the paper inside. She read it in silence, and then the tears began to fall. Walter felt his heart stop. He couldn't interpret her reaction. Was it happiness, sadness, relief, despair? Rosemary looked up at him, and through her tears, she whispered two words that changed everything. "It's you. It's you." The two words echoed in Walter's mind like distant thunder. He stood there, processing, trying to grasp the magnitude of it. He was a father. He had a daughter, a 7-year-old girl who had grown up without him, who had never known of his existence, who had another man as a father figure. And now, in an instant, everything changed. Everything was reorganized. Everything took on a new meaning. Rosemary was still crying, but now he understood. It wasn't sadness, it was relief. It was the release from years of uncertainty, from years of carrying a secret that was too heavy to bear. She held out the paper to him. Walter took it with trembling hands. He read the technical words, the numbers, the percentages. 99.9% compatibility. It was definitive. It was real. He was Olivia's biological father. Walter felt his legs go weak. He sat down in one of the reception chairs, still holding the paper. Rosemary sat next to him, wiping her tears with the back of her hand. "Sorry, I should be happy, and I am, but it's so much all at once. I know. So now what? What do we do now?" The question hung in the air. Walter had no answer. How do you navigate a situation like this? How do you tell a 7-year-old child that the man she knew as her father isn't her biological father? How do you face the man who raised this child for years without knowing the truth? How do you build a father-daughter relationship when you've already lost 7 years? "We need to tell her." Rosemary nodded. "Yes, but carefully, gently. She's still little. She needs to understand without feeling confused or rejected." "And Claudio?" Rosemary sighed deeply. "He needs to know too, and it's going to be hard, very hard, but he deserves the truth. We all do." They left the clinic and went to a nearby cafe. They needed to talk, to plan, to figure out their next steps. They sat at a corner table and ordered coffee that neither of them touched. They just sat there, processing, trying to organize the chaos. "I want to be a part of her life, for real, not just sporadic visits. I lost 7 years. I don't want to lose another day." Rosemary looked at him with her still red eyes. "And I want that too, but it has to be on her time. She needs to get to know you better, to bond, to trust you. We can't just show up and say, 'Okay, this is your father now.'" "I understand. I'll go at whatever pace you need." "Thank you." They talked for over an hour. They planned how they would tell Olivia. They decided it would be best to do it gradually. First, introduce Walter as a close friend, someone important. Let her get used to his presence. Let a natural bond form. And only then, when she was ready, tell her the full truth. As for Claudio, Rosemary said she would talk to him that same afternoon, alone. It was a conversation she needed to have, and Walter respected that. When they parted, Walter walked home with his head spinning. He went inside and was greeted by Zulu with his usual enthusiasm. He knelt and hugged the dog, feeling the tears finally come. He cried. He cried for years of loneliness, of pain, of loss. But he also cried with relief, with gratitude, with hope. Because for the first time in a long time he had something to fight for. He had a reason to wake up in the morning. He had a reason to be better. He spent the rest of the day at home, anxious, waiting for news from Rosemary. She sent a message late in the afternoon. "I talked to Claudio. It was hard. He's devastated. But he understands. He asked for some time to process." Walter replied simply with, "Okay." He didn't know what else to say. He felt empathy for the man. After all, Claudio was also a victim in this situation. He had raised Olivia as his daughter. He loved the girl, and now he found out she wasn't biologically his. It must be devastating. The next day, Rosemary called. She asked if Walter wanted to spend the afternoon with them. Olivia was asking to see Zulu, and this time there was no reason to say no. Walter accepted immediately. He gave Zulu a bath, brushed the dog's coat until it shone, and left the house with his heart racing. They were going to a nearby park, an open space where Olivia could interact with the dog without restrictions. When they arrived, Olivia was already there with Rosemary. The girl was out of the wheelchair now. She still limped a little, but she could walk on her own. When she saw Zulu, her eyes lit up. Zulu also seemed to recognize her. He wagged his tail and approached slowly, as if understanding he needed to be gentle. Olivia held out her hand and the dog touched his snout to it, letting her pet him. "He's beautiful." "He is, and very smart too." Walter unclipped the leash and Zulu stayed close to Olivia, letting her stroke him. The girl was enchanted. She asked questions non-stop, about Zulu's breed, about his training, about what he could do, and Walter answered patiently, feeling a connection grow between them. A connection that went beyond words. It was something visceral, something the blood recognized without even knowing. Rosemary watched from a distance with a sad smile. Walter knew what she was thinking, all those lost years, all those memories that were never made. But there was no use lamenting the past. They could only work with the present and build a better future. They spent the whole afternoon at the park. Olivia played with Zulu, throwing a ball that the dog tirelessly fetched. They laughed together when the dog refused to give the ball back one time. They ate popsicles sitting in the shade of a tree, and they talked about simple things, about school, about friends, about cartoons, about dreams. Olivia said she wanted to be a veterinarian when she grew up. She wanted to take care of animals like Zulu, and Walter felt his chest swell with pride. His daughter. She was his daughter, and she was incredible. Late in the afternoon, as the sun began to set, Rosemary said they had to go. Olivia protested, wanting to stay longer with Zulu. Walter promised they would be back soon, and this time it was a promise he knew he would keep. He walked them to the car. Before getting in, Olivia turned to him. "Walter, you're our friend now, right?" "I am." "Like real friends?" "The realest." "Good, I like you. And Zulu too." She smiled and got into the car. Rosemary waved from the window and they drove off. Walter stood there, watching the car disappear. Zulu sat beside him, as always. And in that moment, Walter understood that everything was just beginning, that this was just the first step on a long journey. But it was a start, and that was more than he'd had a week ago. The following days were an emotional roller coaster. Walter started seeing Olivia frequently, always with Rosemary present, always in neutral settings, parks, squares, ice cream shops. They talked, they played, they built memories, and slowly a bond was forming. Olivia started asking to see Walter. She started telling him about her day. She started to trust him. And Walter, for the first time in years, felt he had a purpose, that he was building something important, something that would last. 2 weeks after the test results, Rosemary said it was time. It was time to tell Olivia the truth. They talked about how to do it. They decided it would be at Rosemary's house, in a familiar environment where Olivia would feel safe. Marilyn would be there too. It was important for them all to be together. On the appointed evening, Walter arrived with a knot in his stomach. He was more nervous than he had ever been in his life. Not even in the most dangerous police operations had he felt so much fear. Because this time it wasn't his life on the line, it was something much more important. It was a child's heart. It was the possibility of being rejected by his own daughter. Olivia was in the living room drawing. When she saw Walter, she ran to him and hugged him. The gesture was so natural, so spontaneous, that Walter almost broke down right there. He hugged the little girl back, his heart pounding. They all sat together on the sofa. Rosemary began to explain. She talked about the past, about how she and Walter had met when they were young, about how they had cared for each other, about how they had lost touch, and about how, without knowing it, Walter was Olivia's biological father. The girl listened in silence, her eyes darting from Rosemary to Walter, trying to process the information. "So Claudio isn't my dad?" Her voice was small, confused. "He was your dad while you were growing up, and he will always be important to you. He loves you very much, but Walter is your biological father. He's the one who gave you life." Olivia was quiet for a long time. Walter felt every second as an eternity. Finally, the girl looked at him. "Did you know?" "No. I didn't know you existed until a few weeks ago. But now that I do, I want to be in your life, if you'll let me." "And are you going to leave again?" The question cut Walter in two. "Never. I promise. I will never leave. I will be here whenever you need me." Olivia nodded slowly. Then she looked at Rosemary. "Can I think for a little bit?" "Of course, sweetie. You can think as long as you need." The girl got up and went to her room. Rosemary wanted to follow, but Marilyn held her back. "Let her process. She needs some time alone." They waited for almost an hour. Walter was shattered inside. What if she rejected him? What if she decided she didn't want a father? What if all of this was too late? Finally, the bedroom door opened. Olivia came out with a drawing in her hand. She walked up to Walter and handed him the paper. It was a simple drawing made with colored pencils. It showed 4 figures: a woman, a girl, a man, and a dog. Underneath, written in a child's handwriting, were the words, "My family." Walter felt the tears fall uncontrollably. He hugged Olivia tightly, feeling her small body against his. The girl hugged him back. "Can I call you Dad?" The question came out in a whispered, shy voice. "You can, please, you can." And that was it. Simple, natural, as it should have always been. Olivia accepted Walter. She accepted the truth. And she decided to give them a chance to build something together. It wouldn't be easy. It wouldn't be quick. But it would be real. In the following weeks, Walter became a constant presence in Olivia's life. He helped with homework. He took her for walks with Zulu. He attended school meetings. And slowly, he took on the role that should have always been his, the role of a father. Claudio remained present too. It was difficult at first. Their encounters were tense, filled with heavy silences. But, over time, the two men found a balance. They understood that they both loved Olivia, and that she had room in her heart for both of them. One day, 3 months after the revelation, Walter was at Rosemary's house helping to organize a surprise birthday party for Olivia. She was turning 8. As they hung up streamers, Rosemary asked, "Are you happy?" Walter stopped what he was doing and looked at her. "I am. For the first time in many years, I'm truly happy." "Me too. And you know what's funny? I spent so many years thinking I had ruined everything, that I had made all the wrong decisions, and maybe I did. But in the end, fate found a way to fix it, to bring you back, to give us a second chance." Walter agreed. There was something poetic about it, about how Zulu, a dog trained to save lives, had saved not only Olivia from the hot asphalt, but also Walter from the empty life he was leading. He had rescued not 1, but 3 lost hearts. He had united a family that never knew it could exist. The party was a success. Olivia was radiant, surrounded by friends, family, and love. Walter watched from a distance with Zulu lying at his side. Marilyn approached and sat in a nearby chair. "Thank you." Walter looked at her, surprised. "For what?" "For coming back. For not giving up. For giving my daughter and my granddaughter a second chance. And for giving yourself one." Walter smiled. "Thank you for accepting me. I know it wasn't easy." "It wasn't. But I saw that you're a good man. A man who deserves to be happy. And who will make my granddaughter happy too." That night, after everyone had gone home, after Olivia had gone to sleep exhausted but smiling, Walter and Rosemary sat talking on the porch. Zulu was lying between them, snoring softly. They looked up at the starry Corbin Springs sky, each lost in their own thoughts. "You know what I realized?" Rosemary looked at him. "What?" "That life has a strange way of working. I spent years thinking I was lost, that I had no purpose, that my story was over. But really, I was just waiting for the right moment, for the right reason. And that reason was Olivia. It was you. It was this family I didn't even know I had." Rosemary took his hand and intertwined their fingers. "And I spent years carrying guilt, thinking I had ruined your life and mine. But now I understand that every choice, no matter how painful, brought us here, to this moment. And this moment is worth every second of pain. They stayed like that for a long time, hand in hand, in silence, building something new on the ruins of the past. It wasn't perfect, it wasn't simple, but it was real, and it was theirs. Months passed. Walter went back to work, doing security for events. It wasn't the police force, but it was something. It was a way to use his skills to feel useful. Olivia adapted completely to the new family dynamic. She called Walter Dad without hesitation. She spent weekends at his house. She played with Zulu for hours. And slowly, that house that had always been empty and silent filled with life, with laughter, with mess, with love. Rosemary and Walter grew closer too, not as a couple immediately, but as partners, as friends, as people who were relearning how to trust, to believe, to allow themselves to feel. And maybe, in the future, there would be room for something more. But for now they were fine like this, building slowly, one day at a time. One morning, almost a year after the rescue, Walter woke up to Olivia jumping on his bed. It was Saturday, and she had stayed over the night before. Zulu was lying at the foot of the bed, watching the scene with a patient gaze. "Dad, wake up. Let's take Zulu for a walk." Walter opened his eyes and smiled. The word Dad still caught him by surprise sometimes. But it was a good surprise, a surprise that warmed his chest. Okay, give me 5 minutes." "No, now." He laughed and got up. They had breakfast together. Olivia chatted on about 1,000 different things, about school, about her friends, about a drawing she was making. Walter listened attentively to every word, every story, every detail, because he knew these moments were precious. They were what made life worth living. After breakfast, they went to the park, the same one where Olivia had first met Zulu. They walked along the dirt paths, the dog running ahead, the girl running after him. Walter watched from a distance, a permanent smile on his face. It was funny how life changed, how in a matter of months everything could be transformed, from empty to full, from dark to light, from lost to found. He sat on a bench while Olivia played. Zulu came back and lay down at his feet, tired. Walter scratched behind the dog's ears. "Thank you, boy, for everything, for saving me that day, for saving her, for saving all of us." Zulu just looked at him with those intelligent eyes, as if he understood perfectly. And maybe he did. Maybe animals were wiser than people, imagined. Maybe they saw what humans couldn't, what really mattered: love, loyalty, presence, the here and now. Olivia came running back, breathing heavily. "Dad, can we get ice cream? Let's go." And they went. The three of them. A man who had learned to live again, a girl who had gained a father, and a dog who had saved them both without knowing it. They walked through the streets of Corbin Springs, under the hot Texas sun, building memories that would last forever. Because in the end, that's what life was about moments, about choices, about the courage to start over, the strength to forgive, the capacity to love even when it hurts, about not walking by when someone needs help, about hearing the cries no one else hears, and about understanding that it's never too late to fix what is broken. That night, when Walter took Olivia back home, Rosemary was waiting at the door. She smiled when she saw them arrive. She hugged her daughter and thanked Walter with her eyes. He nodded and left with Zulu. On the way back, he thought about everything that had happened, about how an ordinary Thursday morning had changed everything, about how a restless dog had saved not one but 3 lives, about how fate had a strange way of setting things right. He arrived home, fed Zulu, and sat on the porch. The street was quiet. A few neighbors passed by. Children played on the sidewalk. Ordinary life, simple life. But now, Walter was a part of it. He was no longer an isolated spectator. He was a participant. He was a father, a friend, someone who mattered, and that, after so long, was more than enough. It was everything. He looked up at the darkening sky, and, for the first time in many years, he felt gratitude. Gratitude for being alive. Gratitude for finding Rosemary again. Gratitude for knowing Olivia. Gratitude for having Zulu. And gratitude for having had the courage not to walk by on that Thursday, to have run after the dog, to have saved a girl, to have saved himself. Life went on, as it always had, with its ups and downs, with its joys and sorrows. But now Walter was ready to live it. He was ready to embrace every moment, every challenge, every victory, because he had learned in the most painful way possible that life was too short to be wasted, and that every second was an opportunity to make a difference, to be better, to love more, to be present. And it was with that thought that he went inside that night. He lay down in bed, Zulu beside him, and closed his eyes. For the first time in years he slept peacefully. No nightmares, no anguish. Just the peace of someone who knows that, despite everything, he is exactly where he is supposed to be.